Okay. The first thing I've had to ask, you are a guy who has been on the airwaves for 40 years, but now your sort of presence has taken a new tour. You're on a Kobe Bryant-esque press tour, like what he did on his retirement. How does it feel to be on every TV station in Rochester?
Well, as long as it's all good news, it's good by me. But geez, a Kobe Bryant comparison. It's so personally gratifying and life affirming, but it's not the kind of things that I've kept top of mind. I just go to work. I love my job and playing music and going to shows and getting with people, and that's all it's ever been. Certainly after 40 years to get this much affection is just awesome. It's a very unique relationship, one that's been fostered over many years. And I don't think it's, there's a bunch of markets, a handful of markets where personalities have stayed that long and enjoy the same kind of, relationship with the audience. But it's just mind blowing for sure.
Has it sunk in yet? I mean, 40 years doing one job is almost inconceivable to kind of the younger generation who bounces around in jobs much more. There's really is not the expectation that you go to one place and you stay there. Has it really sunk in for you that 40 years ago you started at CMF and here you are now? Does that even make sense to you yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to wrap my mind around how long it's been. And people says, wow, it must have just flown by. No, it's felt like 40 years. It's just that I've enjoyed most every minute of it. It's so true. I've loved my job, so I've never really worked. I've had to be places and do things, but so as the anniversaries started to, come around, that was the only time I would really pay attention. Just every day, go to work, play tunes, have fun, go home, go to a show, whatever, get with people. It's just, and it has lasted a long time, and nobody's more surprised than I am. I just don't think in those terms. I just, just another day at work, and I've loved what I've done. And the fact that it's been so widely accepted and welcomed is, again, very gratifying and very affirming that I made the right career choice.
Yeah, I want to back up for just a second here. I think, I'm reminded spending time in our newsroom, how you have to have a really unique brain to be in the industry that we're in, whether it's news or you're a radio host playing music. I think there are a lot of things that draw people with this specific personality to this field. What drew you to radio in the first place? What inspired you to do it? And can you kind of remember what it was like your first couple days on the job when it was starting to hit home that you were going to be a radio host?
Yeah, well, when I left Brooklyn to go to school in Brockport, broadcasting was not on my mind. The first 2 years, you can just kind of feel your way around before you got to declare a major. And I'd always been I was always up on news. And growing up in New York City, you had the New York Times and the Daily News and the New York Post before it became a tabloid. So I said, I like that. And I was good at writing. So I declared as a journalism major when I went up to Brockport. And that same semester, for an elective, I signed up for Intro to Broadcasting. Well, for whatever reasons, it just goes to show that the incredible difference an instructor can make, good or bad, in your life. The woman who was the instructor for journalism did just graded a lot of people, including not, GR like a potato graded. She just, was not a pleasant woman. And as such, and it was also said, there's a lot of writing going on here, because it was a typewriter was all you had. But at the same time, I had an instructor in the Intro to Broadcasting, and he gave this passionate, motivational, inspirational talk about how if you're really interested in radio, you'll go down to the college station and get involved. And I did that afternoon. And only after a couple of years in the business did I realize that this is what I was meant to do, because of how I grew up in New York, listening to some of the great stations and the great personalities. And I guess subconsciously, that stay with me, because I used to hang on their every word. And it was, there was this mystique about the guys or women on the radio. I never thought to call a radio station. I'd never expect I would ever see one in a supermarket or at a show unless they were introducing or something. So it seemed like, all right, I got on this path, maybe accidentally, but subconsciously I was probably, choosing it. So, and I remember when I got my first, paid gig, it was in Geneva, New York, working overnights and playing music I didn't necessarily listen to myself, a lot of soft stuff and Linda Ronstadt and Commodores and things, but I was getting paid to be on the radio. And then after that, it was like, all right, let me at it. And I just happened to find something early in my career, working at CMF in Rochester. I'd worked at the old Magic 92 for a little more than a year. And as time went by, I realized what a good, scene I had and what a good deal I had here, especially from a personal lifestyle standpoint. You put down roots, you get married, you have kids, and you make a life here. And there were some offers out there to go other places, and I just weighed the pros and cons, and I chose quality of life, a couple of times, and I'll never regret that decision. My life is here. And I couldn't be happier about that. And this is where I'll spend my retirement.
Awesome. We'll have more on your retirement in a second, but I do have a couple kind of almost inside baseball questions. It's one thing I kind of, as someone who is by nature bombastic, everyone told me that, oh, you should go into sports radio. And that ended up, not being the thing for me. But, I get all that kind of feedback, but you got into sort of a more happenstance kind of way, and your teacher encouraging you. So one thing I kind of love to ask this question of any person who's on camera or in radio. Your voice is so well known in Rochester. It's the sound of afternoon drive for so many people. How did you kind of cultivate the voice? Because the radio voice is something that's close to how you talk, but not quite. It's not as formal as newspeak. It's this very kind of conversational medium that takes a long time to figure out. How did you kind of come to your voice, and how did you know, okay, this is what I'm going with?
Well, and going back to, my influences and listening in New York City, they talked conversationally. The ones that had the artificial radio voice, you knew nobody talks like that. I mean, when you're a kid and you hear it on the AM radio, it's cool as hell. But you quickly, as you get into the profession, I don't know, I guess just a situation I had, being very comfortable on air and with the people listening allows you to be comfortable. And, I don't walk around talking like this all the time, Dan. I talk the way I talk. And I just happen to be blessed with a nice resonant voice. And, people have said it's calming, and it works for the shift that I was doing. And it's just my voice. I didn't really cultivate it. I just learned how to be conversational all the time.
It's a good key. The other thing I want to ask you about that's a bit more radio inside baseball is we were just actually having a conversation in our newsroom about how the Twofer Tuesday segment is such like, it's such a perfect little block of radio. Talk to me about how that was developed. Was that something you worked on? Was that a station thing? Talk to me about that.
That has been, Twofer Tuesday has been a feature on CMF since before I got there, since shortly before I got there. And you're right, it's a great, you get to play a lot of artists, and you get to play two from them all. And usually a second track is, a little off the beaten path for the most part. And it's just always been one of our most popular features. And when my friend Chris Crowley was here in Rochester programming the station for about a half a dozen years or so, one of the first things he did when he got here was clear the slate. He says, I want to see what works and what doesn't. So he took away Twofer Tuesday and other features that we were doing, and then he waited. And he solicited responses and feedback, and he got it. Twofer Tuesdays went right back in. A couple of things went away, a couple of new things came in, and there it stays. You're right. It's a simple but excellent concept. It breaks it up, during the week, and that's why we still have it.
Beautiful. That kind of leads into my next question. Industries change. You've been in it for a long time. How has radio changed since you first started?
Well, it's been changing we all know the only constant is change. We went from turntables to CDs to hard drives, and all the technology has fostered all these changes. A lot of them good, some with consequences that are not unforeseen or unexpected. The loss of human jobs by automation, and it's just been, again, the changes that we're seeing, especially today, is not unexpected and not a surprise. But the pandemic also ramped up how fast those changes came into play. Once everybody started working from home and the business model was positive out of that, live bodies started going out the door because it was able to be automated and have other people do other shows. So, I've seen it go from a 24/7, always staffed, presentation on the radio to what it is now, a couple of live personalities, and automation does the rest. And a lot of, syndicated shows, whether it's morning or talk or afternoon or night. These are all cost-cutting measures and ways for companies to also maximize the money that they do have invested in the personalities that are being syndicated, et cetera. So, one of the first things to go with tightening of budgets and things was part-time and weekend positions, and that pretty much eliminated any entry-level position for people who were looking to break in. And again, those positions just started going away and becoming unavailable, and it started happening in pretty much every department, promotions. And so it's all based on, look, it's major big business, it's major commerce, and there's absolutely no charade about it, and to cut costs, they cut people, and they don't cut services. They have found with technology to automate it and share it, wherever they need to do it.
So you kind of read my mind on this one, because I can sort of guess what it's been like working from home. I've done varying shifts of it as a reporter. So, like I was home for a little bit, and then I was back, and then I was home for a little bit, and then I'm back. What's really the thing that you miss about working from home compared to being at an office?
I have enjoyed working at home, even, after the novelty, because I thought, all right, this will last, a couple of months and it'll be back in the studio. And then, a return date became an indefinite date. But I can say that I haven't enjoyed working from home, but two glaring differences. One is I miss my coworkers madly. We really have a family of knuckleheads down there, and, we all have to have a place to go, and we all fit. And it's a wonderful, intelligent, creative bunch. And you miss that daily interaction. We had 5 radio stations in there. And I missed that daily interaction, and certainly being able to interact with the audience. I was always on the phone. Now, it was relegated to social media. It's just not the same. It's not the same as somebody calling and me answering, "Hey, how you doing, Dan? Yeah, we'll play that for you." As opposed to, "Oh, I didn't see your request on Facebook from 2 hours ago." So that immediacy and that, it felt like there was a wall in front of us. But it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't ideal. And certainly after so many years of being in the studio, it was different. But I have to say, I enjoyed a lot of things about being home. So certainly my pooch did. So.
I know the feeling. There are goods and bads. So I end every interview with kind of like 3 bigger picture questions, but I have one more before we get there. You've said on the radio, pretty much this whole time, ever since you announced your retirement, that this is really a retirement from full-time radio. It's not necessarily that you're going to be off the airwaves altogether. So what are your immediate plans? Are you going to go back to doing the occasional specials? Are you going to take time off? What is the retirement short term?
I have a list of everything I plan on doing. There it is. Nothing. I'm going to do nothing. Now, let me just be clear. Coming back to work on the radio wasn't even on my radar. 6 months ago, I was just interested in having my contract renewed so I could realize my 40th anniversary. And then after I got that, and things started changing, and there were many personal as well as professional considerations in my decision, and it was not arrived at quickly. It was months and months, and I didn't make up my mind until Christmas. I said, I'll get through my 40th anniversary, and we'll see what happens. But it hadn't been on my radar to come back and do anything on CMF. So I'm retiring. I said I thought that when and if I miss being on the air, I might go around to some of the other smaller local stations in town, locally owned, say, hey, if you would like for me to do a weekend shift or something. But then both my bosses, my general manager, Susan Munn, and my ops manager, Bob Barnett, both said within their first reaction to my announcement, the door will always remain open for you. And I was like, wow, I hadn't even thought of that, because there are things I love doing. And look, I'm ready to give up 5 days a week. And I love doing breakfast with the Beatles on Sunday. I love hosting Alice's restaurant on Thanksgiving. So there is no real reason not to do those. And nothing's definite. And certainly months from now, anything can change. But the idea I'm thinking about is, excuse me, is at some point, if conditions are right, resuming breakfast with the Beatles. And, being the occasional drop in, look, all of the big names in the rock format, they're aging out and they're going to be dying, and you're going to need somebody to eulogize them here. So I'm available for that, I guess, as well. So there's nothing definite other than the door's open if I decide I want to do it.
Awesome. Let's get to our big three questions here. You're from New York. You went to school in Brockport, took a gig in Geneva, but then you were talking about wanting to stay here and why this is a good opportunity. What makes Rochester such a special place for media, broadcasting to live a life? Any chance you have to throw superlatives at Rochester, now is your chance.
What I usually say is, I'm glad I grew up in New York City. I'm glad I don't live there. I've stayed at, look, the fact that I've stayed here is testament to the city, the surrounding areas, the people, the sports teams. It's everything. It's all a big, the parts, the sum is, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. There are so many parts that make Rochester, in my opinion, a great place to live. And here I am, and I plan on staying. This is my entire adult life has been spent in Rochester. 2/3 of my life has been spent at WCMF. So I got no compelling reason to go anywhere.
Awesome. Next one, you're moving on from full-time radio, but if there was sort of one thing you could look back on and sort of say, this was it, this was the big achievement, this is something that I'm really going to remember and hang my hat on, what would that one thing be?
40 years, easy. 40 years because of the rarity of it and how easy it seemed to get to, just not effortlessly, but yeah, it was just a great ride with, rarely any bumps. And, 40 years was just a huge milestone. And that's what I wanted to get to. As I mentioned, once I got to that, I said, all bets are off after that. I put in my time.
Last one, if anyone, really has a passion for radio and they know that's something that they want to do or they're thinking about getting into it, what would your advice for them be?
I hate to say this, but don't. It's a field that is so incredibly hard to get into, and there are hardly any live, although at the local level in smaller markets, there may still be radio stations. So I shouldn't say don't. If that's what your passion is, by all means, pursue it. But I want people to know that it's incredibly tough to break into. It is not financially rewarding at the entry level. And the radio business itself is changing. They'd be more, I would recommend more, by all means doing communications, but starting to look into podcasting and online streaming, anything that has to do with digital, because terrestrial radio is probably going to go at some point the way of the dial telephone. People will be able to have their music wherever they are, whenever they want, on any device they have. So as dire and as down as that sounds, the radio is completely different than it was when I broke in. It's not live all the time, and there's rarely any entry-level positions.